it's Mo. It is the middle of April, and I have started one of two books that I'll be reading for TBR Spin April. Yes, you heard that right. There were two prompts for April's book. One of them had to do with Kieran from Katie Books, so a throwback to the old TBR tackle. And for that prompt, I picked Florida by Lauren Groff, which was on my TBR Spin list. I was able to kind of pick whatever book I wanted for that prompt, and I had kind of been wanting to read this in March, so I picked it up for that. But this is not the book that I'm starting with. I'm starting with the actual spin, which was to read a book by an author that you've read from before. So I picked Woman Hollering Creek and Other Stories by Sandra Cisneros. This is a short story collection, and I have only ever read The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros, which is a short vignette-y YA novella, and I kind of was looking forward to more complete stories in a short story collection, but that's definitely not what this short story collection is about. This short story collection is divided into kind of a larger title and then multiple small vignette short stories, very similar to The House on Mango Street within those larger stories. So there are three larger short stories. The first being My Friend is Lucy Who Smells Like Corn. That's the only one I've read so far. And then within that short story, there are 7 vignette type stories that are only a page or two. And then that kind of completes that story. So like I said, I'm finished the first of those overarching short stories. The next one is very short. It's only 2 short vignette stories. And then the third one is much longer, having many more vignette short stories within. It's hard for me to say what this short story collection is all going to be themed around, if anything, but so far it is definitely very similar to The House on Mango Street in that it's told from younger perspectives, from younger children, and it's kind of about the pains and joys of growing up. So it's about your friend who you like but maybe other people don't like. It's about playing Barbies and finding Barbies at the flea market. It's about taking care of your brothers. It's about going to church when you don't want to. It's about being wild at a movie theater or a restaurant when your parents are trying to relax and enjoy themselves. And of course, it's all framed from a Latinx or a Latina perspective, how culture and language intersperse with that. So far I am enjoying it. I just read the first part today and I liked The House on Mango Street okay. I think I went into it with the wrong expectations because I had heard of it as this great modern classic YA, and it just wasn't as plot driven or as cohesive as I thought it was going to be. But going into this one, knowing that it's not going to be like that, knowing that this is going to be vignettes, and sometimes the vignettes are going to come together and sometimes they're not, similar to The House on Mango Street, I think I have a better understanding, so I'm going into it with a more open mind. So I will be continuing this. I'm reading this while I'm reading other books, as I do with short story collections. And when I'm done with this one, or when I'm done with one of the other books that I'm currently reading, I will probably move on to Florida, but I will let you know. If you aren't playing TBR Spin, you totally should be. TBR Spin is an amalgamation of the BookTube Spin and TBR Tackle. It's a way to pare down your TBR throughout the year. In the beginning of 2023, we picked 12 books, and each month Jill from the Book Bully or Sarah from Freshly Read Books spins a wheel with prompts on it, and those prompts lead us to pick a book from our 12-book stack. So if you're starting now while you're watching this video, pick 8 books or 7 books, depending on how you want to do it, and watch their video for April or May, depending on how you want to do it, to find your prompt for what book you're going to pick. The prompts are all different. There's none of the same, and when one prompt is chosen, it comes off the wheel. The prompts generally are just that. They're just ideas or ways to pick your prompt. For instance, an author on your stack that you've read before. And then it's very casual. So if you didn't have any authors on your stack that you read before, if you picked all new to you authors, you would simply pick one off your TBR and trade that out for one of the books in your stack. stack. And then sometimes there are prompts that maybe change your pile around, or there are guest creators who will give us a prompt along with our spin prompt. So I definitely highly recommend playing the TBR Spin. It's super fun. And at the end of every spin vlog, I pick the book for the next video. So at the end of this vlog, you will get an overview of what my spin pile looks like. We will watch the next video and pick our book for May. Let me know if you're participating in TBR Spin. Let me know how you're doing. And when I read some more, I'll let you know. April, and I have read one more section of Woman Hollering Creek. Only 44 pages in, but this book is only 165 pages. It's interesting because the first section all seem to be connected or written about possibly the same person. But the second section of short stories, which were just two short stories, were not connected, it didn't seem like. They seemed like they were following a sort of common theme, but weren't based on the same people at all. So I'm interested to see what this next section is like. This next section is the longest section with quite a few short stories in it. And it looks like also the longest short story in it. So the first section was called My Friend Lucy Smells Like Corn, and all of those more or less seem to be about the same group of young kids. The second section was One Holy Night, and those were two short stories that didn't seem to be connected. The third section is There Was a Man, There Was a Woman, and that has 13 short stories in it, and that is the last section. So that is the rest of the book that I have to read. So far I'm liking it. Something that I've noticed about Sandra Cisneros' writing is that she writes about young people a lot. She writes about young kids who are 6, 7, 8, 14. She writes about it in a very innocent, childlike manner a lot of times. So even when the subject matter is extreme or sexual or violent, she is coming at it from a child's lens in a lot of her stories, in a lot of respects. And I don't love that. Although I think she does it really, really well, I don't like that because I don't really like to read from children's perspectives. I guess I don't really understand why you would write from that perspective, because the storyteller, the subject of the stories, don't necessarily understand what's going on in the stories. And you, as an adult reader, maybe understand more what's going on, like a 14-year-old girl getting seduced and impregnated by a 37-year-old man. From telling it from that child's perspective, that kind of innocent but also ignorant perspective, the story isn't necessarily, I think, enhanced, because you know how wrong that child is and how damaging that situation is. Or even talking about friends being mean to each other when they're kids. I don't really understand why everything is from this child perspective, and I don't really love it. That is part of the issue that I had with The House on Mango Street, but in that I think there was a growth and a evolution of the storyteller, because it was all told about basically one family. Even though there were many other people in the stories, you kind of followed a core group of people. Whereas these stories are so short and you follow one person and there's never any full awareness or resolution of mind to the stories. I like the writing a lot, and I think that it's done in a very simple, simplistic way that is childlike, certainly, but also compelling to read. So I think that's kind of what kept me going through The House on Mango Street and also through this. I'd like to read some of Sandra Cisneros' poetry because she's well known as a poet as well, and I wonder if her subject matter is still the same. And then I also would like to read a real book from her, like an actual novel that was more linear maybe, if she has those, which I don't know if she does, to see if her beautiful writing kind of comes through in a more appealing way to me, or in a way that I can connect with more. So I'm going to continue on with this, and when I read some more, I will let you know. And then this morning, I started Florida by Lauren Groff. Well, actually, I started it last night, and I read the first chapter, which I thought was a chapter. And then I went on to the second chapter today, and it turns out that this is also a book of short stories. My problem with reading 2 books of short stories is that I find it hard to follow short stories anyway, reading them all at once. So what I will usually do is read one short story, pause, move on to something else, do something else, come back a little bit later, read another short story, which is how I've been reading Woman Hollering Creek. But I don't think I can do both at once. So I think what I'm going to do is, for the rest of this TBR Spin video, I'm just going to be continuing Woman Hollering Creek, and I'm going to put Florida down and read this another time. I'm definitely going to read it in a TBR Spin video at some point. Either it'll get its own TBR Spin as like a bonus, or I'll read it in conjunction with another book that I pick later on. But I can't do 2 short story collections together. So this video will just be about Woman Hollering Creek. So I have finished Woman Hollering Creek and Other Stories by Sandra Cisneros. Sandra Cisneros has this very beautiful poetic language in some of her stories at some times that I really enjoy. So not all of her stories are poetic. Well, they are, but not all of them are beautiful and compelling the way that I enjoy. A lot of them are kind of harsh. They're people talking to each other, but kind of silently through the book, or they're a series of letters or little vignettes. I love vignettes. But sometimes her writing is very harsh, and sometimes it's very ugly, poetic, but ugly. But sometimes it's very beautiful and poetic, and those are really the parts that I enjoy the most. So the last time I talked to you, I think I was in the last section, which was the largest section of short stories. The first section was mainly like children and from the perspective of children and about children, and I liked that one the least. I liked both of the stories in that middle part. I think my favorite story was Woman Hollering Creek, the titular story, which is about a young woman who kind of rushes to get married. She wants to move out of her father's house, and she wants to do right by the family, and she ends up marrying a man who is not very nice and living a life that she doesn't really want to live, and having to protect her children from America and the world, and also her husband. So it's kind of about her life and the changes she makes. I also really liked the last story, which was Bien Pretty, which was about a woman of Latinex descent who moves to San Antonio, Texas, and falls in love when she wasn't expecting it. Unfortunately, falls out of love when she wasn't expecting it too. I also liked Never Marry a Mexican, which is about a young woman who takes revenge on a lover in a very roundabout way. And I enjoyed a lot of the stories. I just don't know if Woman Hollering Creek is really for me, but I'm interested to keep this and revisit it at some point and see if maybe I would get more out of her work later. I also still really, really want to try Sandra Cisneros' poetry because I think I might connect more with her poetry. So that was the April pick for TBR Spin, and now it is May 1st and it is time to watch the Book Bullies video and pick our next TBR Spin book. So if you'll remember last month, because I picked 2 books, I had a extra book that I had to put in, and for that book I picked Ruby Fruit Jungle by Rita Mae Brown. I also have The Joy Luck Club by Amy Tan, The Secrets of Nim by Robert C. O'Brien, In Love and Trouble by Alice Walker, Severance by Ling Ma, The Bean Trees by Barbara Kingsolver, Mr. Wilson's Cabinet of Wonders by Lawrence Welcher, and As You Wish by Carrie Elwes. So those are my potential choices. Let's watch the prompt and find out what we get. Her cat is in this video, so that makes me happy. Okay, so the prompt was pick a book with an even number of pages. So now I need to look and see which of my books have an even number of pages. Okay, so I went with the last numbered page because obviously there's some like other pages that aren't numbered, maybe acknowledgments or the author bio or something like that. And I have 5 out of my 8 books, but I think it's going to be pretty easy to choose. I am going to be reading The Joy Luck Club by Amy Tan. It is the Asian readathon for May, so this is the perfect time to read this Asian authored work. And it is definitely considered an American modern classic at this point. So I'm super excited to read this one in May. This book was written in 1989. I think my mom read this when I was little, and I vaguely remember there being a movie of it and everything. I don't think I've ever seen the movie or really know the plot, except I do believe it's about Chinese women moving to America and then their Chinese American daughters. So I think it is an intergenerational tale of family, which usually isn't my thing, but I am really excited to read this to see why this is considered by many a modern classic. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!